Katie Takayasu, MD, is a board-certified family medicine practitioner who specializes in integrative medicine. She earned her MD from Wright State University, completed her residency at Columbia, and also earned a fellowship in integrative medicine when she was at Stanford Hospital. Is that right, Katie?
Yes.
And now in her practice at the Tully Center in Stanford, Dr. Katie combines traditional medicine with complementary medicine and modalities like nutrition, acupuncture, and optimizing your complete lifestyle. Katie is part of the Center for Integrative Medicine and Wellness in Stanford and serves as the director of the Chronic Pelvic Pain Program. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Katie.
Well, look at that. I get an applause, like a visual applause. So lovely. So nice. It's so nice to see so many like friendly faces. I know many of you, and it's nice to see you. Hello. I'm going to start sharing my screen with you. So I'm going to lose track of you. But like I said, just keep typing into the chat if you have any questions along the way, and feel free to ask Paul to interrupt me if something seems relevant. Here comes my screen. Oops, here we go. And can everybody see that okay? Okay, wonderful. So we're going to talk a little bit about integrative medicine and the integrative approach really to thinking about stress management, especially when it comes to thinking about supporting your own self or someone that you love who perhaps is in recovery. And so we're going to focus a little bit more specifically on that tonight. But do know that what I'm going to talk about is really applicable to every human. Because we are all on this pathway together. And I was doing a little bit of advertising about this talk on Instagram this morning. And one of the things that I said was that if you sat in my shoes, which means sitting in a doctor's office, listening to patients talk, which is what I do, most of my days is listen and try to synthesize. What I have found is that it's our neighbors, it's our friends, it's the people just like us who seem to have everything, who, drive the nicest cars and have the prettiest Christmas cards and, whatever sort of like marker we have for success. And it's that none of us escape this life, unscarred. We all have really challenging things that happen to us, and to recognize that we're all on this journey in a very vulnerable, humble place, and that maybe we can do a little bit better job. That's my hope tonight, is that I'll share with you some tools, some things that I use in my real life too, to help me manage stress. And I hope that they're useful to you as well. I don't have any disclosures, but I wish I would someday. So if anyone wants to hire me for some fancy job, let me know. I want to just tell you a little bit about myself. So even my patients don't really know this, but I'm writing a book right now. And in the intro chapter, I've really delved into the reason I got into integrative medicine. And it really comes from a really holistic place, which is it comes from the heart. And I stumbled onto this pathway because I needed it in my own life. I started out a chubby girl from Ohio. And this is not, by the way, meant to make anybody feel bad about their own journey. This is my journey that I'm going to share with you for the next minute or two. And, we're all on our own path. And so if any of this speaks to you either in a not so nice or a nice way, just know that it's just meant for you to get to know me a little bit better, so that maybe you trust me a little bit more. But I started out an overweight kid. And I think that I was probably eating a lot of my feelings and a lot of my boredom, and also just not eating well because, we just didn't know any better. And when I finally got to medical school, I discovered that I had a lot of coping mechanisms. I was very smart, but when I got to medical school and I was with another hundreds really smart people, I didn't really have a lot of faith in my own efforts, and I became quite anxious. And it really sort of spiraled out of control into the fact that, like, within the first month of med school, in the midst of the anatomy lab and dissecting the cadaver and all of that, I lost an incredible amount of weight because I just couldn't eat. I just, for the first time in my whole life, wasn't hungry. And I was just so anxious about the fact that everybody seemed to know more than I did. And then, I sort of managed around that in multiple ways. And I became an overworked resident where I worked, 80 plus hours every week on end for 3 years. And really at the end of it was kind of a shell of myself. And it was in my struggle to become a mama bear and a struggle to take better care of myself that I asked my family doctor if he had any resources for me as a stressed out person. And he said, maybe you should go see my wife's acupuncturist. And I thought, it's a strange recommendation, but I'll go. And it was there on the acupuncture table that I had that epiphany moment of like, oh my goodness, I need to teach and share this with other people because I feel so amazing. At that very same time, I started doing yoga on the regular, and I stopped running all the time and I started just walking and doing more gentle exercise. And at the same time, I stopped eating hospital food and I started packing my lunch, even though it was not convenient at all. And I discovered that if I slept more, I felt better. And all at once, I got myself into this place where I realized that if I slept a little bit more, didn't exercise so crazily, ate really good food, and spent time connecting to my spiritual self, that somehow I was able to manage myself better. And since then, I've become a mama bear, which has been really great. And subsequent to that, developed a chronic SI joint injury. Your SI joint is where your pelvis and your hip meet, and your back meet in the back of your body. And I kind of whacked that out when I got pregnant with my twins. And ever since then, have had chronic pain. But you know what? I just have learned how to deal with it from an integrative way. So I come to this space today, sharing the story with you to let you know that even though things look really great right now, they haven't always been that way. And every day is a struggle for all of us to do our best. And so I'm here right along with you. I'm going to talk about why we need integrative medicine, why it's so important to think about having a holistic practitioner in your life. We're going to talk about what stress and resiliency mean, and we're going to define that for you. And then we're going to talk about my top 5 resiliency strategies so that I can share with you all that I know. So health is a state of complete physical, social, and mental well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. This is what the World Health Organization said about health back in 1948. But can you believe we haven't really come much further in our understanding of health over the course of time? We really have stemmed from this place where health has been really the absence of disease. And that really stems from the fact that way back when, the things that were taking us out, our top causes of death, were things like tuberculosis or pneumonia, really communicable diseases. And now the stuff that's taking us out are really the things that are influenced by lifestyle. So things like heart disease, cancer, stroke, all of that kind of stuff. And so what we really need to do is switch our mindset from really like saving us from death and really actually promoting lifestyle. I love this quote from a physician that wrote a book. It's called Moody Bitches, for all of you ladies out there. And her whole book is written about the fact that we try to medicate ourselves out of our feelings. And we do that with prescription medications. We do that with antidepressants. We do that with drugs and alcohol. We do that with food. We do that with lots of different things in our life. And what she says in this New York Times article that talks about her book is that people are trying to medicate a normal reaction to an unnatural set of stressors, lives without nearly enough sleep, sunshine, nutrients, movements, and eye contact, which is crucial to us as social primates. So the next time that you're feeling lonely or tired or angry, or you're reaching into the refrigerator, or you're thinking about whatever you're thinking about doing, and you know it's not good for you, ask yourself if really what you're trying to do is just hide your feelings with what you're choosing. In medicine, we really don't think so much, and I say Western medicine, we don't really think so much about the root cause. We diagnose things like cancer and allergies and diabetes, but below the surface, the root cause are things like inflammation and stress and bad digestion and trauma in our past. And these are the things that we think about in integrative medicine. We're all about getting to the root cause. Integrative medicine is that beautiful mixture of traditional Western medicine along with evidence-based complementary modalities. So we take the best of both worlds. I like to talk about my use of things like Lipitor in my practice as a good example. Just today, I was having a conversation with a patient who has high cholesterol, and she has tried lots of different things in her lifestyle. We've worked on her diet, we've worked on exercise, we've optimized her supplements, and she still has really high cholesterol, to the point where she's developing little like cholesterol deposits in her eyelids. And we were having a conversation today about other things that she could do. And one of the things that I did suggest to her was actually considering using a traditional statin, because we know that that will decrease the cholesterol. And so just like I always have my integrative hat on, always thinking about alternative modalities, I also still have my doctor hat on. And so I like to believe that I have a huge toolbox to work from. And that makes it really exciting for me to practice medicine, and why I love sharing this with so many people. So integrative medicine pulls in the biopsychosocial model. This means that we really think about patients in the context of their minds, their physical bodies, and then also their spirits. And we're very patient centered. I think about myself more like a coach than I do a doctor, because I'm constantly working with patients to figure out what's going to work for them. And I always say, almost always in a first patient visit, that if I ever make a suggestion and it doesn't work for you, just let me know, because I want to help you. And if I make a suggestion, it doesn't work, we'll find another thing that will work for you. And I often let patients direct their care along with me alongside, which is much more coachy than it is doctory. And like I said, I utilize all appropriate therapies. People ask me all the time, who needs an integrative medicine doctor? And I really say everyone. If you've got anything on this list that you want to deal with in your life, from mental health issues to issues like with metabolic issues like diabetes, high cholesterol, if you've got women's health issues, chronic pain of any kind, from fibromyalgia to headaches to irritable bowel syndrome, whatever you've got going on, there's probably an integrative approach that could be taken, and I would be happy to see you in my practice. I use food, exercise, sleep, and then attendance to the spiritual self, along with good stress management, as the basis for what I help patients do. And then, we use things like supplements and herbs and acupuncture, those kinds of things to kind of help along the way. But the big push is getting those four pillars: food, exercise, sleep, and spirituality in check. So let's talk a little bit about stress and resilience. So, as you all know, stress is just dessert spelled backwards, which is kind of evil this time of year, right? I don't know about you, but I'm getting cookies right and left, and it's getting a little disastrous in my kitchen. I want to let you know that there are good stressors and there are bad stressors. I like to think about stress like a stoplight. So there are green stressors in our life. This is the stress that kind of helps us get out of the door on time in the morning. It's what helps us, meet a deadline on a work project, or, just helps us get through our day. Those are green stressors, and they're fine, for us to handle in our life. Then there are yellow stressors, and yellow stressors are the types of stressors that we can withstand for an okay amount of time. So if someone got COVID in our family and we had to take care of them, that would be a yellow stressor, because we would be, taking care of them for a couple of weeks. It would be really stressful, but then it would be over, hopefully, and life would go on as usual. And our bodies can really sustain that kind of stress for, a short but like normal amount of time. Then there are things that are red stressors. These are the stressors in your life that your body can only withstand for very short periods of time. This is the stress that you might feel if you are, trying to pull a small child from before being hit by a car, or if you have something really, really traumatic or scary happen to you. You know when these kinds of stressors kind of pop up, because those are the fight or flight stressors. It's when our fight or flight response like zooms into action, and we get sweaty palms, and our stomach is churning, and we're sweating, and we just feel awful. But we could run through a saber-toothed tiger anytime that we needed to. Those red stressors we can only withstand for seconds, minutes, hours, maybe a day at most, before our body really starts to give out. And the problem with the way that we live our lives is that most of us don't really operate with many green stressors anymore. Everything is like a yellow or even a red stressor. And what that requires from our body is a huge cascade of hormones from the adrenal glands that starts with cortisol and really rips through our body in an inflammation cascade. And it's that inflammatory cascade that makes us feel so bad, not only in the moment, but downstream, literally affects every part of our bodies, and ultimately can lead us to gain weight, can lead us not to sleep, can lead us to feel just all shades of awful all of the time. And so, what we're going to talk about today is how do we manage bringing the red down to the yellow down to the green, and then just sort of accepting the green stressors in our daily life. So, if you took all of the causes of stress, you could loop them into expected life events that cause stress and unexpected life events that cause stress. So, when you get married, when you become a parent, when your kids move to college, when you get older, these are all things that we sort of expect to happen in our lives. But then there are a whole host of things that happen that we have no control over. Potentially unexpected pregnancies, if you get relocated for a new job, if a person in your life gets hospitalized or you get hospitalized, or if your partner serves you divorce papers. These are all sort of unexpected things that can really upset the apple cart. And so, what I think about when I'm trying to manage stress is not so much managing the stressors, right? Because so much of that is external and not really something that we can actually fix or have control over. But what I think about is building a basket of resiliency so that whatever stressor comes into our lives, we can handle a little bit better. And so, the goal of stress management, like I said, is not to decrease the stressors, but just to handle them better. And no surprise, the things that pull into our resiliency basket are things like good nutrition, daily joyful exercise, getting really good sleep, taking well-placed supplements, and then attending to our spiritual self. And we're going to go through all of those things today. So let's talk about my top 5 secrets to managing stress. So, secret number 1 is eat real food. This sounds so basic, but it's actually quite complicated. I love this quote by Michael Pollan. Everybody's probably heard this one, but I think it's worth repeating. Eat food, not too much, mostly plants. If you follow this, you're probably going to do a pretty good job with your diet, because I'm a big believer in the 80-20 rule, which means that it only matters what we do about 80 to 85% of the time. So remember that what you put in your body is actually medicine. The food that you eat every day, the choices that you make 3 times a day, plus or minus some snacks, are really the medicine in your body. And really, it's like giving your car gas. If you had a really fancy car that required a certain type of gas, you wouldn't give it the crappy gas, you'd give it the good gas. So I want you to think about your body like a really lovely Ferrari. You want to put good stuff in so you can get good stuff out. And in food, quantity and quality matter, meaning that it's not just about how much you eat or how many calories you take in. It's really about the quality of the food. And we know this from studying different energetics of different foods, meaning that if we watch someone who eats, say, 50 calories of raspberries, which, come from a bush or a small little plant and are totally natural. We call them in my house nature's candy. If we watch someone have raspberry versus raspberry jam, calorie for calorie, the metabolic impact on the body is very different. And so it's important to think about quality really when choosing your foods. And that doesn't mean that you need to eat organic. It just means that you need to be a really good judge of what's real and what's not. So 25% of Americans, and probably more, the statistic's a little bit old, struggle with metabolic syndrome, which is that disastrous combination of high cholesterol, high blood pressure, diabetes, weight gain around the middle, triglyceride issues. And so one of the ways that you can really work around that is being mindful of your diet. I also remind everyone that not everyone is supposed to eat every food. And so if you eat something, even if I tell you today that it's healthy, if you try to eat it and you're like, yo, that does not agree with me, then I don't really want you to eat that food because it means that it's not good in your body. So, first things first, when we're talking about diet, most of us should be following a Mediterranean type diet. And this is a diet that's got an emphasis on vegetables and fruit. And notice that I put vegetables first because they are the most important. And there's also an emphasis on whole grains, monounsaturated fat, and high quality lean protein, mostly from plants. So things like lentils and legumes, whole organic soy have a big emphasis in a more plant forward Mediterranean diet. In the Mediterranean diet, there's less emphasis on dairy, animal protein, except for the fact of omega-3 rich fish like salmon, black cod, and halibut. Those are very good for you. And processed grains. In fact, anytime that you look at something and you're not exactly sure how it got on the face of the planet, this should cause you pause and make you think, I probably shouldn't eat very much of this food. When they've taken the Mediterranean diet and compared it against our typical sort of American Heart Association low fat diet, the one that all of us were following in the 90s, and they actually have followed people out. They have found that people who follow a Mediterranean diet have lower fasting glucose, meaning lower blood sugar. They have lower systolic blood pressure, and they also have lower inflammatory markers. So Mediterranean really is the way to go, plus or minus a few caveats based on your own constitution. And like I said, I follow the 80-20 rule. There's four follow-ups to this. So one is don't drink your calories. The reason you shouldn't drink your calories is because when you drink your calories, you miss out on fiber. And fiber is your best friend because fiber is what slows down the rate of absorption of sugar into your system. That's why eating raspberry jam is different than eating just straight up raspberries. And also, when you're drinking your calories, you're not really getting very many nutrients in your life. So if you are having on average, say, one soda a day, 150 calories, say, that's 150 calories of salad or vegetables or quinoa that you're not eating. And those types of foods are much more nutrient dense. And I really care about nutrient dense food. Remember that plastic packaging is bad. If you see something that comes in a plastic package and it's got more than one ingredient, it doesn't say just farro or quinoa on it. It's got some unpronounceable things on the ingredient label. That should also cause you pause that this is probably not the best choice for you and that you need to eat very little of that. I shop the perimeter of the grocery store when I go. I barely go down the aisles. In fact, when I go down the aisles, I almost have to really think about where I am. I don't know where stuff is because I mostly shop in the fruit, vegetable, lean meat, those kinds of departments. Again, ask yourself, did Mother Nature make this? This is one of my favorite things to ask patients when they're like, well, it says whole grains on the Cheerios box. And I was like, well, does Cheerios grow on trees? And then they look at me like, no. And I'm like, well, then you shouldn't eat very many Cheerios. They're not very good for you. I'm a big believer in extra dark chocolate, so I never leave a lecture without talking about how great it is. I really think we should be eating 80, 85, 90, even brace yourself, 95% extra dark chocolate. And what I have come across in research is that one of the reasons to eat extra dark chocolate is that it's really rich in a particular type of fatty acid called stearic acid, and that it's actually an anti-inflammatory fatty acid. So unlike saturated fats from other sources, stearic acid is really good for you. But you have to eat the extra dark chocolate because in order to get enough of these really good flavanols, resveratrol, the stearic acid, you have to eat quite a lot of chocolate if you're not eating chocolate that's very dark. So you can see in my slide here that to get 200 milligrams of these beautiful flavanols in dark chocolate, you'd have to eat 1,500 calories worth of milk chocolate, or 300 calories of dark chocolate, or if you are really bold and you just ate unsweetened cocoa powder, only 20 calories. So you can see as you get less and less sugar in your chocolate, you get many more bang for the buck. So try, just try increasing. If you're at 70% right now and that's kind of all you can tolerate, well, the next time you buy a bar, buy 75, and then you increase to 80 and then 85. I remember the first time that I had 85% dark chocolate. It was when I started resident or a fellowship, and it was so bitter at the time that I literally put it in my mouth because I love chocolate so much. And I was with my colleague, and I had to do the thing where you like don't move your mouth and you're pretending that you're not about to spit out what you're what you have in your mouth, because it was so bitter to me. And now, honestly, after all these years, 8 years later, when I have 85% dark chocolate, because I generally eat 90 or 95, 85 tastes like heaven. And so it's all about retraining your taste buds, which all of us are capable of doing over time. The last thing I want to say on this slide too is that you should sweeten foods yourself. The food companies dramatically oversweeten, oversalt, overfat our food. And if you sweeten foods yourself, you're going to do a better job. So a great example of this might be yogurt. If you're really into yogurt, which I am, it's very rich in probiotics. I always buy unsweetened. And if I want a little honey or something in it, or nature's candy fruit, I'll put that in. But it's far less sweet than if I were to buy a flavored yogurt. And this is really important for kids too, because kids don't have an upper threshold of sweet. They don't really know when something is too sweet. If you put enough sugar in something, an adult would say like, oh, I've had enough. But a kid doesn't really have that tendency. And so it's important for us to sweeten the foods for our children so that they don't sort of grow up with that processed way of eating in their lives. In the spirit of eating real food, here are some examples of ways that you can do a good job. I've put in here some quick homemade meals that might work out for you. Honestly, these days we're all kind of sick of home cooking because we've been home cooking for so long. And so if you are buying meals out or buying frozen sort of helpers at the grocery store or at Trader Joe's, what I do is I thin these things out with extra vegetables. So I keep extra frozen vegetables in the freezer. And if I order out, say, like a delicious Thai curry, I will either order extra steamed vegetables from the Thai place, or I'll add just frozen vegetables to it to kind of just stretch it out a little bit. And you can usually take stuff like that and you can stretch it out for more than one meal, which also expands your budget, which is also a very good thing. It's also important to remember your microbiome. So these are all the beautiful little probiotics that live in your gut that help us digest. We have more probiotics in our body than we do cells of the actual human body. And our microbiome is populated right from when we're born, when we pass through the birth canal. And it's fed by breast milk if we are fed if we're nursed by our moms. And the way that we keep it going through our life is we try to avoid antibiotics. We try to eat probiotic rich foods. So things like plain yogurt or kefir, kimchi, miso, tempeh, kombucha, sauerkraut. And if these are not things that are in your life, don't despair. They weren't in my life much either a couple of years ago. And I've slowly built them in over the course of time and actually grown to like them quite a lot. But it does take a little bit of work because they're not, you don't really wake up like craving sauerkraut, I suppose, unless you're from, my hometown, because we actually do love sauerkraut back in Ohio. And then you also want to consume prebiotic rich foods. So prebiotic rich foods are those foods that are really rich in fiber. So things like onions and garlics and sunchokes are all really beautiful sources of fiber. And honestly, any vegetable, any fruit is a good source of fiber. And all of that vegetable that you eat is just in service of feeding your microbiome what they like to eat so that they can secrete these beautiful little anti-inflammatory molecules called short chain fatty acids, which go around all over the body and really truly create magic. So most of the magic that you get from food is the magic of the food, but there's a whole nother separate story going on in your digestion that's basically even more powerful. And those are the good little probiotics. So I could talk about food all day because I love food, but we're going to move on to tip number 2, which is sweat almost every single day. I don't believe in life that you need to be perfect about anything. That's no fun, and doesn't leave us very much wiggle room. And I think having a little bit of wiggle room is really helpful in giving ourselves grace, right? But I would like you to move almost every single day. There are so many studies out there about the benefits of moderate to vigorous exercise. I think it's more important to really think about exercise being joyful. If you get done with exercise and you're like, darn, that was really good. Like, I feel amazing. That was probably really good exercise for you. If you get off, the exercise bike and you feel like someone's got to mop you up off the floor, then it was way too much. And let your body be your guide. Your body has infinite wisdom, but most of us don't listen to it because it's not convenient. And so I recommend just spending 20 or 30 minutes a day doing something that makes you feel amazing. We know that exercise has a huge impact on depression and anxiety and our mental health. And honestly, we know that exercise is good for our cardiovascular systems. But in my life, the number one reason that I personally exercise is because I know that it's good for my mental health. And I know that I'm a better doctor, I'm a better mom, I'm a better human being. I'm more graceful to myself when I spend a little bit of time every day doing something physical with my body. We also know that green exercise, or that which is done outdoors, is more beneficial for us. So in the absence of tomorrow, which is going to be a little treacherous in the morning, I would recommend trying to get yourself outside, even if it is just for a few minutes, because we really do so well with outside exercise. And I also think about, it's not just about cardio. A lot of people think it's, just about exercising the heart, but it's also important to maintain your lean body mass. So one of the most important things you can do to stay young in your body is to make sure that you stay strong, so that you're building and maintaining your muscles. I always joke that when I was in the back of the exercise class doing squats, I was not thinking about how cute my butt was going to look in my bikini, but I was thinking about the fact that my grandmother, who's in her 90s, still living independently in Ohio, can get up off the toilet every day by herself. She doesn't need anyone to help her. And I want to be that awesome lady who's living independently, who doesn't need help wiping her bum when she gets old. And you know how you do that? You do that with muscle maintenance and making sure that you stay strong. So we talked a little bit about activity level. I think timing of the day may matter too. There's a lot of different research out there about the timing of exercise. I think it's probably most important to do it whenever it fits in your schedule. So if it fits in your schedule first thing in the morning, do it then, even if that may not be the perfect time in the body. We also know that if you exercise after you eat, like within 2 hours of a meal, that you actually have better blood glucose control. So if you came to Thanksgiving at my house, you would be forced to go on a walk in the little woods behind my house after the meal, because we know that this makes us feel better. And inherently, you kind of know that's true. If you just sit on the couch after you eat, you don't feel very good. But if you get up and walk and move, you're like, okay, I feel a little bit better. And if you can fast before exercise, it does help. So if you can do it first thing in the morning before you've eaten anything, it may make a little bit more of a metabolic impact for you. It doesn't matter how you exercise. You can honestly do anything. I think some of the best things that I've done since COVID has started is honestly just call friends and just take a walk outside. We call it kind of the walk and talk. We just do virtual walks, like we're, walking alongside each other, but we're not. We're just talking on the phone. But it's a nice way to catch up with people and also get your daily walk in. But there are many different ways to do it. So just find something that feels good in your body. All right, secret number 3, sleep makes everything better. So we all know that sleep makes us feel better. But one of the reasons that exists is because sleep really helps us to detoxify and to recharge. There are 2 things that really determine how we're awake and how we're asleep in our lives. The first thing is our circadian rhythm. This is just the regular diurnal pattern of being asleep mostly at night and awake mostly during the day. And there's the other thing called the homeostatic sleep drive. And this is just how much sleep you need to feel great. Most of us need 7 to 8 hours. There are, of course, those few rare birds who need like 5 or 6 hours. And then there are the people who need like 13 hours. But most of us are somewhere in the middle of that bell-shaped curve. And so if you need 8 hours to sleep and on the regular, you're giving yourself 6.5, you're not going to feel very good because you're just not sleeping enough for your own homeostatic sleep drive. Also recognize that as we age, that sleep patterns change. So when we get into our elder years, we tend not to sleep like through the night 100% like we did maybe when we were 20 or 30 years old. Most new moms will tell you, most menopausal women will tell you that sleep just changes, like hormonally it changes as we age. And I think a lot of times we have really unrealistic expectations that we're just going to like magically fall asleep at night and magically sleep all the way through the night and then magically wake up in the morning. And for many of us, it just doesn't really work that way. And so when you are finding yourself with some sleep troubles, like first of all, like talk to your doctor. But second of all, like give yourself some grace. Maybe your expectations are a little bit too high. So, insomnia is the difficulty in either falling asleep or maintaining your sleep. And then it's associated with some type of daytime impairment, meaning that you're really fatigued, you're really sleepy, you can't concentrate when you're trying to do something. And insomnia affects 15% of the population at some point in time, and is also often in conjunction with psychiatric disease, depression, anxiety, substance abuse, and other traumatic things that happen in the life. Sleep honestly makes everything better. And one of the reasons that it does that is it allows our body to reset. The problem that happens for most of us is that when we don't sleep, it's not so much the act of like not sleeping, but it's like the story we start to tell ourselves in our head. And that becomes sort of this big cycle of stress. So maybe we have a couple of restless nights because we're worried about something. And then we start to think about, oh, gosh, like tomorrow at work, I'm gonna really drag. I'm gonna do a terrible job on that presentation that I'm supposed to give. And then you add to that a bunch of misconceptions that we have about sleep. And then all at once, you have this big stress perpetuating cycle that prevents us from sleeping, and we develop persistent insomnia. What I have found in my practice is that insomnia is really not from insufficient sleepiness, it's from excessive wakefulness. It's not that we're not tired at night if we're not sleeping well, it's that we're over stressed. We're in that constant state of yellow and red stress, and our bodies honestly just aren't allowing us to drop down into that more restful state because it's stressed all the time. And so, what I would sort of pose to you tonight is if you are someone who struggles with sleep, that you really need to relinquish your wakefulness. You need to let go of all the things that are keeping you like dialed in all day long, stressed, and surrender to your rest. And therein lies the secret of meditation. We'll talk about that in a minute. Secret number 4 is that supplements are supplemental. One of my favorite stories to tell about a patient who came in my office, she was a little bit older and she came in, no joke, with 2 shopping bags full of supplements. And when I asked her what she was eating for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks, she looked at me. She's like, well, I have cereal for breakfast and a sandwich for lunch, and then I have macaroni and cheese for dinner. And I just about fell off my chair because I was like, oh my gosh, this poor woman had spent so much money on supplements and she wasn't actually feeding herself real food. So remember, you cannot supplement your way into good health. You should be getting your nutrition from your food and your environment. So, really, if you're not in the kitchen cooking, you probably need to be. And so I'm going to be that doctor who's like, get in the kitchen and get your hands dirty because that's where the real nutrition comes. It's almost impossible. Unless you're working with one of my doctor approved chefs, it's almost impossible to get really good quality food if you're not making it yourself. And spend some time outdoors. The best way to get vitamin D in your life is not from a supplement, it's actually to get it from the sunshine outside. So even tomorrow, if it's cold, go stand on your deck for 5 minutes and just kind of open up your jacket a little bit and get some sunshine on your chest. That will raise your vitamin D levels too. Unfortunately, we live in this place called Connecticut where it's not very sunny very much of the time. And so I have found that vitamin D supplementation is important for many patients. So it's definitely something to talk to your doctor about because it does make people feel better. I've also found that omega 3s are a good one to supplement. We talked about omega 3 rich fish like salmon, black cod, halibut. If you can't get those in your diet on the regular, like once a week, then taking omega 3 supplement could be good for you. I personally have taken an omega 3 supplement since medical school. My dad told me it would make me smarter. And as you heard, I had a lot of anxiety about how dumb I was compared to everybody else. So I started taking it, and I've been taking it for for about 15 years. And I do think that it really helps. I think it helps me sleep at night also. So I just take that and I eat fish on top of it. I'm also a really big believer in supplements like turmeric and ginger, but you can also get those in your diet as well. All right, last rule. This is be present. This is my my medical-ish approach to talking about spirituality. So we talked a little bit about the fight or flight response. So we all have in our background this thing called the autonomic nervous system, and this is our background nervous system. It's what really governs our heart rate and our breath and like all the things that you just don't really think about that just sort of happen in your body. And there's two parts of it. There's the sympathetic part, which is our fight or flight response. They call that the fight or flight or freeze response because there's really three options. And then there's also the parasympathetic response. This is your rest and digest response. And the problem is because most of us are so stressed out, we're spending so much time in the sympathetic that we're not spending very much time in the parasympathetic. And so we get this imbalance in the body. We can also kind of liken this to Chinese medicine. So in Chinese medicine, we talk about yin and yang, and we need that balance of yin and yang in our lives to feel well. So yang is like the sympathetic nervous system and yin is like the parasympathetic. So when we do acupuncture, lots of times what we're trying to do is actually decrease some of the yang and increase some of the yin so that we can find more balance. But you can also do this with meditation. The reason that meditation works is that it short circuits this thing called the default mode network. And the default mode network is basically just like your average busy brain. It's like your daydreaming brain. And when you're in the default mode network, you're telling yourself kind of like a story, you know, because you're sort of thinking about things. And maybe you're thinking about when you talk to, you know, your mom earlier in the day and she sort of just said something that kind of just got you a little bit. And then all at once you start telling yourself a story about something or another, and then you sort of spiral out of control. And that's how our daydreaming mind kind of takes over and creates stories for us that are not true. And what they've found is that 50% of people actually spend people spend about 50% of their time in the default mode network, just in this sort of daydreaming brain telling themselves stories. And that the more time that you spend in this daydreamy brain, not being present, not being focused, not being centered, it actually correlates with unhappiness. So one of the best ways to improve your happiness over the course of your life is to actually start meditating. So if that's not something that's, you know, easy for you, on my website, which is just drkatie.com, there's some information about integrative medicine. And under that, I have a whole little page on spirituality. On that page, there's some free meditation that you can use at any time. It's my lovely voice leading you through some just gentle muscle relaxation exercises. But things like acupuncture, even when you sleep, when you do psychotherapy, when you take antidepressant medications, when you do yoga, when you do meditation, even when you use psychedelic drugs, which I don't recommend, but it's just interesting, I think, in this context to think about, that all of these allow us to tap into that sort of deeper sense of self and get out of the default mode network. And it's in that out of that default mode network that we can improve our sustained attention. So maybe if meditation is hard for you, you start with 30 seconds, or you start with being mindful while you put your shoes on. And instead of while you put your shoes on, thinking about the 5 things you've got to do in the next hour, you just think about putting your shoes on. It's kind of a novel thing. When I wash my hands during the day, my mind wants to think about all the things that I've got to accomplish. But what I try to do is police it so that all I think about is the actual act of like rubbing the soap and rubbing my hands together. And that's my way of tapping into mindfulness on a regular basis. But there are lots of ways to meditate. So if doing mindfulness is not for you, and mindfulness is nothing more than paying attention on purpose without judgment, if that's not for you, then do some guided meditation, do some yoga. Maybe you want to just even spend a meal not playing with your phone and just thinking about the conversation that you're having with others around the dinner table. Or the ultimate of pleasures, I think, is actually eating alone and just thinking about how good your food tastes. When's the last time any of us ever did that? I mean, it's been a while, right? So fortunately, we have time to start that anytime. So I encourage you to try to find some mindfulness in your own life. I also really love this idea of hygge, and I'm not going to pronounce it correctly because I'm not Danish. But I love this idea of coziness, especially this time of year. So when you're thinking about things that bring you joy, that don't have calories, that don't, aren't bad for you, the things that we kind of come back to are things like a warm blanket and a fire and playing board games and listening to our favorite music and maybe calling a friend. It's all these things that bring us joy, and that we generally don't spend enough time in our life, like really doing the things that bring us joy. This little book, it was called The Little Book of Huga or Hage or however you say it. And one of the pictures they had, which I snapped a photo of, is this really funny chart that compares the things that bring us happiness compared to how much hours we spend a day doing it. Can you see, if in your screen, what's at the top of that list? Sex brings people a lot of joy and happiness. How much time do we spend doing it? Not very much at all. But if you go down to the bottom of the list, work. We spend a lot of hours at work every day. How much joy does it bring us? Not that much. So I encourage you to really think about reprioritizing your life. Don't quit your job. That's not a good idea. That's not a great strategy. But think about in your regular, non-work or in your free time, the way that you can structure your life. Think about, are there just ways that you could bring yourself more joy? And lean into those, especially this holiday season. Encourage your loved ones to do the same thing. I'm constantly in a creative state in my business, not in seeing patients, but in my side business, Dr. Katie. I love being in the creative space. I love creating content, but I've decided this holiday season that instead of creating more content, I'm actually going to just be creative in other places in my life, because actually being creative in the kitchen or being creative with crafts or making holiday cards is actually really fun and a really wonderful way for me to spend time with my kids. And so I encourage you, whatever brings you joy, I encourage you to really lean into that this holiday season. All right, I'm going to pause there and see if we have any questions that I can answer. Now, don't all jump at once here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. Let's see. There we go. Now I can see all of you again. Does anyone have any questions? And you're also welcome. There's not that many of us. You can take yourself off mute as well if you'd like.
All right, well, I'm going to ask that question. I warned you I was going to ask Dr. Katie. And that was about CBD.
Oh, yes. So you guys
What's
are going
your
to have
view?
an amazing lecture coming up in January, which sounds fascinating. I think the world of THC and CBD is a really interesting one. So just to make sure we're talking about the same thing. So CBD is the non-psychoactive part of the cannabinoid, sort of like the whole
Cannabis
like
plant.
THC
Yeah.
cannabinoid system. And CBD has come into favor these days because people are noticing that it's got a lot of really positive aspects, and you can get it from hemp, which is obviously legal and really wonderful. And so the thing to remember about CBD is that you kind of have to start slow, generally like 10 to 15 milligrams, and kind of see how you feel. And also be aware that it affects a lot of other things in your body. So if you're taking medications that are cleared by certain liver pathways, you want to make sure that you're looking for interactions. Like if you're taking certain antidepressants or certain cholesterol drugs or stomach medication, you want to make sure that you're doing your due diligence there, because it can potentiate the effects or actually inhibit the effects of other medications. You want to make sure that you're safe. And you want to make sure that CBD is either used more commonly topically or under the tongue, because it really, a lot of it is eliminated by what's called first pass metabolism, which is when it goes all the way through your digestion. You actually lose quite a bit of effect. So if you can get it under the tongue, or if you can use it topically on an area in your body, like say that hurts, then you're going to get more bang for your buck. And, honestly, you have to really pay attention. I have patients all the time who bring me like little products that they've gotten for free, like when they've bought something else online and they get, this little vial of CBD oil. Honestly, a lot of the like less expensive stuff is not very potent. And so expect to pay quite a bit of money for a good potent CBD. And there's a lot of really good shops around these parts in Stamford, in Norwalk, in Westport, people who really know what they're doing. And so if you're kind of new to this area, go in and talk to them and tell them what's going on in your life and what you want to work on, and have them suggest a product to you. But most of the research done about CBD is really about pain management. There's some stuff about sleep, though that's a little bit conflicting. There's emergent stuff coming on ADHD and concentration. And then there's also an emerging stuff coming on like neuropathic pain modulation, as well as other like neuropsychiatric things. And I have a lot of patients who are anxious who tell me that they just feel better when they take a little bit of CBD. So, the proof is in the pudding. Not everything works for everybody. Me personally, I don't really think CBD works all that well on me, but I have patients who swear by it. So I would give it a try if it's something that you're interested in, seeing if it works in your life. I love that question, though. Thank you, Paul.
Sure, no problem. And so when someone comes in, could you just describe, okay, I've come in to your office, I have pain, or maybe, I had cancer and I've lost a lot of weight, I'm really weak, or whatever my status is that gets me there. What do you do? How do you evaluate someone?
So I do a history just like every other doctor, but I'm asking more integrative medicine minded questions. So we're going to talk about, like, if you came in and you're like, I have headaches, we're going to talk about the headaches just like every other doctor does. So I can figure out like what kind of headache it is, what's worked for you in the past, what makes it feel better, what makes it feel worse, what other stuff happens along with it. But then instead of talking about, taking Advil or even like, migraine medication, we might talk then about acupuncture. We might talk about supplements that could work for you. We could talk about food things that you're doing, or maybe you're drinking too much alcohol, and that's leading you to have headaches. We're talking about sort of all the other things that may, make a problem worse, aside from just medication, which is kind of the way that doctoring works these days. Is you come in, you have a pain, and someone writes you a prescription for something. I'm looking at everything else to see if there's something in your lifestyle that could be switched around a little bit to help you feel better. And like I said, I try to coach my patients, so I try to help them come up with many of their own solutions. So, I told you today that I want you to exercise 20 or 30 minutes a day. But sometimes that's not doable for a patient. They might say, like, yeah, that's just like too much. And they would shut down and not do anything. And I might coach them to say, well, what can you do? And they could say, well, you know what? I can take my dog for a 5-minute walk in the morning. Okay, great. Let's start there. And so it's all about this sort of meeting a patient where they are. I'm sure many of you are familiar with like the harm reduction model. And I use that a lot in my practice. Well, if you can't do exactly the perfect thing, well, let's figure out like what will work for you. And that's a lot of how I work with patients.
Morgan, did you have a question?
Um, I, I guess I'm a little curious about that comment you said. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Okay. About all the bacteria and good stuff about a vaginal birth versus a not a vaginal birth, because I had triplets and one came out vaginally and the other two didn't, and I'm starting to wonder if like if that has some effect on them now as 22-year-olds, and the two that aren't so healthy in different ways are the ones that came out C-section. So
Oh, interesting, right? Okay, as twins, as a mom who carried twins, like, let's all give her a round of applause. Seriously, triplets,
Yes.
that is no joke, my friend. And the fact that you pushed one out and then had two come out the other way, ooh,
Wow.
that's just a lot. It's a lot on the body, man.
yes, it was.
Yeah, it's just a lot. No, you didn't mess them up. Just, I mean, some of us come out that way, some of us come out the other way. And the fact that actually that you got one out vaginally actually probably is probably, I would imagine, I don't know what the statistic is, but I know for twins, 75% of births are cesarean section. So I would imagine for triplets, it's probably like 90% or 95%. So you did a really good job. But you know what? That's where it starts, right? That's where it starts. But you have the option every single day to educate your microbiome. And that's where those probiotics come in. So maybe for those two of your kids who are not doing as well, maybe something like a probiotic could be really helpful for them. And maybe even encouraging them to put down the soda and maybe pick up some kombucha. Some of that stuff can be really, really helpful. And I find a huge correlation between what happens in the gut and our mental health. And we know that there's a huge amount of neuro tissue in the gut. And in fact, it's a crazy percentage. It's like 90 or 95% of our serotonin, which is a beautiful chemical that's released in the brain, is actually most of it's released in the gut. So if you can influence the gut with probiotics, then there's a good chance that you could potentially influence them in other ways as well.
Thank you. That kind of hits really well with one of them. Some
Good.
neuro tissue help with
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
the gut and stuff.
And there are many good probiotics on the market. Generally, you want to look for one that's got, maybe 25 to 50 billion colony forming units and has multiple strains. And I'm a big believer in pulsing probiotics, which means you don't use the same probiotic for years on end. You might use a probiotic for 3 months, then take a break, and give yourself a holiday, and then switch to a different probiotic for a couple of months, then give yourself a holiday, then try a different one. So over the course of the year, you might be trying 3 or 4 different probiotics, and that's going to constantly sort of keep the gut in constant rotation, because as you know, our bodies get very used to doing the things it always does. That's why, like, if you start doing push-ups, you get really good at doing 5 push-ups, and then your body's like, okay, I got this, like, what else you got for me? So you have to constantly keep it changed up.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And my hat's off to you.
Amelia, go ahead.
Hi. Good evening. This is
Hi.
Amelia. Hi, Dr.
It's so nice to see you.
Katie. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
So nice to see you as well. I miss you. It's been a long time. Excuse me. I do have a question regarding the supplements. So as far as the omega-3s, vitamin D, turmeric, ginger, and we just covered the probiotics, what might you recommend as starters, especially for someone that's having a lot of pain related to neurological and bone and inflammation, not currently taking any anti-inflammatories, kind of laying off anything with anti-inflammatories at the moment. So what can I do naturally to reduce pain, especially I was considering the turmeric, if I'm pronouncing it correctly.
Yeah. I think turmeric is a really great
others.
place to start. It's pretty hard to get enough turmeric in your diet unless you're really eating it morning, noon, and night. And it's a pretty potent herb. So a lot of us, can only tolerate sort of so much in a curry. And you want to make sure that if you're buying a product with turmeric in it, that it's a really potent one. So you want about 500 milligrams twice a day. And generally you want to make sure that the product also has black pepper in it so that your turmeric is systemically absorbed. If you're just getting plain old turmeric, like if you were just making a curry and you didn't put any black pepper in it, most of that anti-inflammatory effect would just stay in your bowel, which is really great if you're trying to help with something like ulcerative colitis or, more something that's going on in the bowel. Otherwise, in the body, if you're trying to decrease inflammation, you want it to have a little bit of pepper. So one supplement I love is Gaia, Gaia. They make great supplements in general. And they have a product out there called Turmeric Supreme, and you can do 500 milligrams twice a day. That's a really great one to start. And give it like a month. I'd say herbs are pretty gentle. So generally you need to take them longer than you would need to take a medication, but give it a month and see how it goes. Omega-3s, super anti-inflammatory. I recommend those in food source or in supplement source, as we talked about. Vitamin D can actually be really helpful for pain, and we know that for COVID, it's actually been pretty helpful as well. And then the other thing that I take on the regular in my life is magnesium. And magnesium can affect your bowels, so you do have to be careful about what kind of magnesium you take. If you have normal stools, you can take magnesium glycinate, like 400 milligrams at night. And generally, people report that helping with headaches, with muscle tension. It helps with sleep. It can kind of just dial down anxiety at night as well. Magnesium is one of the few things that if I forget to take at night, I'll actually get back out of bed and like go downstairs and
Wow.
take, because I think that it helps so much. So
I agree. I do take that. I take a 250 at night of the magnesium.
you could be a
And
little more
vitamin
aggressive
D.
if you wanted. So you
Okay.
could try a little more if you wanted.
Okay.
But yeah, add the turmeric. See how that
And
goes.
the vitamin D, would you recommend weekly? Okay, great. Thank you.
Oh yeah, and
And
vitamin
omega-3, any particular one? Do you like that brand?
I like for omega-3s, I like Nordic Naturals. They make great stuff. They make a product called Pro Omega, which is really great. You can do 1,200 milligrams a day. And then vitamin D, you kind of have to play off of the level that you have in your blood. So you can ask your primary care doctor or your integrative medicine doctor to check it for you. But most people
Mhm.
need somewhere around 1,000 or 2,000 international units a day. Great
Okay,
question.
mine is normal, so about 1,000 a day.
1,000 a day is good. Mhm.
Okay, great. Of vitamin D. Terrific. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Anything else for pain in the way of, I know you mentioned the CBD. Anything else you could recommend for headaches, back pain, hip pain, SI joint pain, muscle
The
spasms?
other anti-inflammatory herb that's coming to mind is boswellia, and you might actually find boswellia in combination with turmeric. So you might do a 2-for-1 there. There's a product out there made by Gaia called NF-KB musculoskeletal, and it's got turmeric, boswellia, as well as maybe cat's claw. I can't remember exactly what's in it, but that would give you a bunch of herbs that would be good for musculoskeletal type pain.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Katie just had a question on functional medicine. What is that?
So functional medicine is like a subsect of integrative medicine, and functional medicine really focuses much more on the sort of idiosyncratic pathways that exist in each individual body. And there's a lot of lab testing that goes with that. It's really fascinating stuff. I don't pretend to understand all of it. I have done a little bit of functional work with like GI stuff and also with hormones. But it's very much the idea that like if you were working for say like on irritable bowel syndrome, instead of sort of thinking about just about nutrition and supplements, you might actually do what we call like a fancy stool test and see what actually is going on in the gut. You might measure inflammatory markers in the poop. You might also measure what the probiotic mix is, or if someone's got enough of certain enzymes that tell you about how they're breaking things down in their digestion. So functional medicine doctors use all that information then to fuel the supplements that they recommend to their patients. One of my colleagues at the Center for Integrative Medicine, her name is Danielle Greenman. She's amazing. She practices a combination of functional and integrative medicine. So if that's something of interest to you, seeing someone like her would be really helpful.
No, I just heard the term, and there are a lot of terms thrown around, holistic, integrative, functional. One specific thing, enzyme supplements, is that the same thing as probiotic supplements, or is that something different?
That's a little bit different. So enzymes, digestive enzymes, are little proteins that help to support your digestion. Theoretically, we should all be secreting the enough digestive enzymes from from our pancreas when we're eating. But for many different reasons, if our bowel is injured or we have chronic underlying diseases, or, our body's just not in a good space, we don't tend to secrete the digestive enzymes that we need. And so some of us can get really bloated when we eat, or we have indigestion, or, we have diarrhea or constipation or whatever's going on in the digestion. If you do have question, if your digestion is off, you simply can look in the bowl and every morning notice if your poop looks normal or not. And if you don't know if it's normal, most of us actually don't know if it looks normal because we only ever see our poop. Unlike me, who I talk about poop all day long. So, honestly, go online and look at a Bristol stool chart and look, does my poop actually look normal? And if your poop is anything but smooth, coming out in sort of one long piece every day, and it's kind of a non-event, it just sort of happens and you don't have to think about it too much. If it's anything more than that, accompanied by gas or a lot of effort, or it's coming out at unexpected times, or you can't control it or whatever, then you may want to consider doing something about your bowel health. And digestive enzymes can, for some people, be really, really helpful.
Okay. Again, I was just reading a little bit and seeing that enzymes mentioned as well. So
they can be really helpful if you're like a person who you just notice, like when you go out to dinner, that a heavier meal just doesn't make you feel that great, or if you eat like a steak and you're just like, wow, like that really sits in my belly. You could try some digestive enzymes and just see with certain meals if they help you like not have as much gas or bloating or indigestion. For some people, they're really helpful.
And you don't typically talk vegan with patients just because it's so hard to keep to a vegan diet?
I don't recommend 100% vegan diet. I recommend a Mediterranean-based plant-forward diet, which means that you're prioritizing plant-based proteins, but that you're not eliminating anything in life. We know that like if you follow a 100% vegan diet, that you have to be super cognizant about getting things like B12 and vitamin D in your life, because those are really only available in animal forms, at least efficiently available in the body. And so I kind of recommend, making like 80%. Again, it's like that 80-20 rule. I keep coming kind of back to that with everything. But make 80% of what you eat more plant-based and really good in your life. And then you don't have to worry so much about the other stuff.
Okay. Well, we typically try to keep these to an hour. So I'm just looking around. If anybody has any final question, feel free to shoot.
Absolutely. You can send me an email at any time. I'm hello@drkatie.com. And my website is Dr. Katie. There's lots of really nice information on there, as well as a whole variety of recipes that I've been compiling over the last couple of years that are more plant forward and not too difficult to make in the kitchen. And all of them are accompanied by the reason that they're good for you, which is also like a great way to sort of just increase your knowledge and your capacity in the kitchen. But I would love to hear from any of you at any time, and certainly in any capacity. So I wish you a happy holiday. Thank you for spending part of the snowstorm with me.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Dr. Katie.
Thank you.
Enjoy
Thank
the
you
snow
so
tomorrow.
much. Thank you for your
everyone.
time.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. And
Happy holidays.
yep, same to you.
All right. Thank you
All
all.
right.
Have a wonderful
Merry
evening.
Christmas.
Merry
Happy
Christmas.
holidays.
Have a good
Thank you so
evening.
much.
Bye-bye.
Happy New Year
Bye
to
now.
you. Let's hope a happy, healthy.